Among the biggest hits of the 90s, Home Alone may be in a category of its own in terms of, wait, that made how much money? It didn't have huge movie stars or groundbreaking special effects, but for what Home Alone may have lacked in spectacle, it more than made up for it in heart, humor, and a surprisingly keen understanding of the vexation that mischievous black sheep-style children go through when they want to be treated like adults. Kevin McAllister was the audience surrogate, the misunderstood troublemaker who wishes for his family to disappear, and they do, while defending his home from burglars with Rube Goldberg-style traps, which, along with the movie's more tender moments, made it a motion picture that could appeal to both youngsters and adults alike. Home Alone may have not been the first of its kind, but it's hard to argue that it wasn't the most successful, and with success came the copycats. While the 80s often focused on the undercurrent of kids living suburban lifestyles with fractured families, while sometimes going on Spielbergian-style adventures, the 90s would ground things more towards the lens of a power fantasy, featuring dweebish archetypes living out their greatest desires. In 1994, in one of the more clear cases of trying to piggyback off Home Alone's success, the Walt Disney Company would release Rupert Wainwright's Blank Check. Brian Bonsall, of Family Ties fame, stars Preston Waters, the 12-year-old neglected son of an entrepreneur who aspires to have his own business, but his age and his lack of experience leads to ridicule and bullying among his brothers and his fellow peers. Preston gets his chance to prove his worth when he crosses paths with an escaped convict named Carl Quigley, played by Miguel Ferrer. Quigley decides to give the boy a blank check, both as a way to pay back for breaking his bike and also to get the police off his trail. When Preston tries to cash the check for $1 million, it gets him the eye of the bank president, Edward H. Biderman, played by Michael Lerner. Biderman, it turns out, is in cahoots with Quigley. When Biderman mistakes Preston for Quigley's associate Juice, he hands the boy a real $1 million. Preston escapes just as the real Juice, played by Tone Loc, arrives. Blank Check wears its early to mid-90s aesthetics on its sleeve very hard. Director Rupert Wainwright got to start making music videos, and this movie is chock full of flashy montages that are clearly trying to apply that same level of rapid, fast-cut, in-your-face editing, complete with some of the most on-the-nose songs you could possibly have for a movie about how much dough matters. Yeah. I know you're the guy who made MC Hammer's You Can't Touch This video. You don't need to remind me or the audience. Preston's spending frenzy includes a limousine with a chauffeur named Henry, played by Rick Ducommun, who does stand-up material and, of course, is the butt of fat jokes. Swell, incredible toys, the obligatory 1990s virtual reality, you really had to be there, guys, and a gigantic castle, with production designer Nelson Coates' work here, in particular, deserving of singled-out praise. It's not surprising that Preston's castle has since then become a cult fan favorite location. Preston also creates an adult persona in the form of Mr. Macintosh. Macintosh announces he's throwing a birthday party, garnering him and Preston the attention of the town societies. Is this movie just an extended Apple commercial? Probably. The problem, ultimately, with Blank Check, though, is that it's a classic case of having your cake and eating it too. Writers Blake Snyder, who later penned the Save the Cat screenwriting Bible trilogy, and Colby Carr may have successfully poached from Home Alone's kid power fantasy vibes, but they have flubbed in their attempts to have it double as a moralistic fable meant to teach kids the importance of valuing family over money, with a story that is as shallow and as skin deep as the characters that inhabit it. A lot of the writing here feels like the worst examples of adults inserting questionable grown-up elements into a children's story. Emphasis on banking and a child wanting a job, check. A cuckoo banana plot that requires every character to be an idiot for it to work, you betcha. Okay, this isn't that bad, relatively speaking. I just wanted to bring it up because I'm astonished at how far $1 million can get you in this film's universe. There are some puzzling questions that come from this. Like, why does nobody ever put two and two together that Preston and the Apple Man are one and the same? Is this town just so bereft of excitement that some guy with money is enough to get people pumping? Even the villains, who are so obsessed with the dough to the point where they threaten children, come off as entirely clueless here.
You know, $1 million doesn't buy all that much these days.
I missed out on the whole thing, to be honest with you. I was confused by it. I was very confused by the whole thing, if I'm being honest.
And then there's Shay, Preston's would-be older girlfriend. Yeah, let's get the elephant out of the room. If there's anything that Blank Check is most remembered for, it's the relationship between Preston and Shay the bank teller, aka an undercover agent in disguise, played by Karen Duffy, which feels like one of the worst examples of playing up to your audience. I'm not going to defend this because, well, what do you even need to say? Just look at it. I will say in theory, it's actually fine. Kids having crushes on older adults is not a strange concept in of itself. Here's the problem though. This is the early 90s. Nobody is going to comment on how weird this relationship is, with all glaring indications suggesting that they are pushing full steam ahead. It's not helped that Shay isn't so much a character as she feels like the writers inserted desired dream girl. If this is what they consider romantic, then personally, I'm rather revolted. But worst of all, it's just an undercooked script, with any attempts at pulling at one's heartstrings falling mightily flat of intended effect. Preston's father Fred, played by James Rebhort in particular, is probably the worst offender in this regard. If I were to buy his transformation from an attentive caretaker to better appreciating his son, it might have helped the film if he had been given some real perspective. But instead, it feels like after a while, the movie sorta just forgets about him. The scene at the end where Fred apologizes to his son, then other guys in Mr. Macintosh, doesn't strike me as heartfelt so much as it is just plain old mush. If I can give the film any positives though, I will say this. The climax at the end where Preston turns the tables on the criminals by using his toys, Home Alone style, is fun. Although it does kind of get ruined by an infamous scene. Oh, grumble, grumble, grumble. Yeah, this movie's pretty bad, guys. You know what the 1990s were a wonderful time for? Baseball movies. Yep, the 90s was arguably that last vestige of time when baseball could have been conceivably depicted on screen as America's premier sport, and you wouldn't be getting into regular fist fights over it. So, it should come as no surprise that in the midst of a glorious run of baseball movies that included Major League, Field of Dreams, and A League of Their Own, Hollywood decided to turn the bat down and appeal more directly to a diminutive crowd. The 1990s would see three major kid-centric baseball movies. One of them, the classic The Sandlot, has been disqualified on the grounds that it doesn't fit the outline that I set up for myself. Namely, that it is a nostalgic period piece and not a contemporaneous movie at the time it was released. The other two, both coincidentally from first-time directors who never took another swing at a movie side of the camera ever again, ahem, on the other hand do count. Daniel Stern's 1993 Rookie of the Year and Andrew Scheitman's 1994 Little Big League. Rookie of the Year is a perfectly acceptable, whimsical, good-hearted, magical realism tale with a premise that is so unrealistic and stupid that if you try to rack your brain around it, you might end up comatose. In other words, don't. Thomas E. Nichols stars Henry Rowengartner, a loser little leaguer who dreams of making it to the majors. During a game with his friends, Henry is injured and his tendons heal too tight. The resulting incident leaves him hurt, but he acquires a fast throw. While at a Chicago Cubs game at Wrigley's Field, Henry's throw catches the attention of the crowd. The Cubs are on a historical losing streak, and to spice things up, Cubs manager Larry Fisher, played by Dan Hedaya, decides to recruit Henry as the youngest big leaguer ever. Henry is initially terrified of having to play to a crowd of hundreds, but soon becomes confident, and in the process gives the Cubs the miracle they've been looking for. I guess you could say he's the accidental Roy Hobbs of elementary school. If there's anything that Rookie of the Year does well, it's that it accurately portrays a bird's eye view of what would happen if a kid joined the majors. Spoilers, but they definitely initially freeze up from all that mounting pressure. If Rookie of the Year treats baseball as a big lark of a cartoon, then Little Big League is more equivalent to a baseball fanatic's dream come true turned nightmare. Luke Edwards stars as 12-year-old Billy Haywood, a baseball little leaguer fanatic who knows everything there is to know about the sport. When Billy's grandfather Thomas, played by Jason Robards Jr., who owns the Minnesota Twins, passes away, he hands the team to Billy. Billy quickly takes to his new position as owner, but learns the hard way that you should never have a boy do an adult's job. These movies have a lot more in common with each other than one might think. They both star quirky, misunderstood Little League baseball fanatics who are raised by their single mothers. Kids in question have a crush on a girl in school, although both movies don't really do anything with its elements beyond surface level. In Rookie of the Year's case, it's more to show Henry's social status change, and even then, the school aspect is more of a blip on the radar. While in Little Big League, Luke's supposed crush on a girl is a minor trifle that is left to a single scene. The kid's mother gets involved romantically with the main adult baseball player. In Rookie of the Year, it's Gary Busey, and one of the last times he could realistically play a normal nice guy as pitcher Chet Steadman. Although, being Gary Busey, as you might expect, you're gonna get the occasionally intensely delivered moment.
That's gonna make you stupid. I guess it already did.
While Little Big League has Timothy Busfield as first baseman Luke Collins. In both films, the kids' best friends begin to think that the main character is an entitled jerk who is now too famous to hang out with them. Although Little Big League definitely handles this way more gracefully, as the friend conflict in Rookie of the Year is kind of over with in like 10 minutes. Almost as if the screenwriter included it because they needed a forced dramatic conflict of some sort. Most importantly though, both movies are all about the price of fame. How being thrust in the spotlight and having all these expectations put on your shoulders is not good for your mental health or your well-being. How they approach such subject matter though is almost entirely antithetical to the other. Rookie of the Year is essentially one big giant silly grin of a movie. Everybody is playing things to the rafters here. From director Daniel Stern, inserting himself in the film as Phil Brickma, a goofball who can kind of be read as being a little cuckoo. It's a time period. Who serves as Henry's mentor and has a habit of locking himself indoors. To Bruce Altman as Jack, Henry's mom's boyfriend, who's normal at first, until he's informed that he's going to reap the rewards from Henry's success. At which point, he basically turns into a mustache-twirling villain. I guess Henry was right to dislike him. This movie's reality center is very black and white. And John Kennedy, uncredited, who did the film as a favor to Daniel Stern, also plays a Harry Carey-style sports announcer named Cliff Murdoch. Would it shock you if I told you he has some of the movie's best lines?
Well, that's going to bring Rocket's earn run average to about 300 or so, which equals the attendance here today.
While Little Big League is trying to go for more relative poignancy in its approach to the world of baseball, treating the sport as mythological, akin to Field of Dreams or The Natural, it's not without silly moments, of course. We're talking about Butt Monkey Lovin' versus the important question of if Batman goes to McDonald's.
I'd hate to be the guy behind the Batmobile in the drive-thru. Batman steps on that gas, flame comes out.
Can I persuade you to take a sandwich with you, sir?
I'll get drive-through.
Neither of these films are exactly what I would describe as witty, but Little Big League is not as inherently goofy as Rookie of the Year aspires to be. And with its more intrinsic focus on the actual mechanics of the sport of baseball, it feels like it was written by an actual obsessive, with the players coming off more like genuine teammates and less caricatures. It's not a perfect film. Its emotional moments suffer from a semi-patronizing feel. If there's anything Rookie of the Year has on Little Big League, it's they can't be Bill Conti on his best days when it comes to a rousing sports anthem, as no offense to composer Stanley Clarke, but his score for Little Big League kind of hinders the film at points. But otherwise, I was grabbed by Billy's narrative of self-destructiveness in a way that, say, Henry from Rookie of the Year's prototypical 90s story arc of the geek who gains self-confidence and goes from zero to hero overnight didn't. Little Big League is also buoyed by its sports-filled cast. Of the 13 main baseball player actors who appeared in the film, only 2 had never been involved with sports professionally, Jonathan Silverman and Timothy Busfield. Its climactic, drawn-out baseball scene also features real-life professional figures like Ken Griffey Jr. and Randy Johnson, granting it far more authenticity and adding genuine stakes. It's a credit to both films, though, Little Big League and Rookie of the Year, that they shoot in actual baseball stadiums, with their endings being interesting examples of just how relatively diametrical in tone their approaches are. In Rookie of the Year, the players triumph in spite of Henry oh so conveniently losing his magical arm. Thank God for teamwork and the boys' belligerence, I suppose. Little Big League's ending is far more bittersweet, with the players not only not winning, but not even making it far enough to get to a potential tie-breaking victory. So many of these 90s children films that I've watched are about the alleged magical time period before the end of childhood innocence, when those hormones hadn't completely kicked in and you didn't have to worry about your priorities getting straightened out. Little Big League and Rookie of the Year both end with a child deciding they're not yet ready for the real world. But how they diverge from said subject matter is why I prefer Little Big League over Rookie of the Year. Speaking about the time before the end of childhood innocence, let's talk about summer camp. Summer camp. I always struggle with it as a concept, if only because it felt like an excuse to get me out of the house, when I would have preferred to have sat indoors the whole season and just watch TV or something. Somebody must have realized the antagonism that many kids face with a dreading summer vacation, because in 1994, the same year that they blessed us with blank check, the Walt Disney Company, under their subsidiary of Hollywood Pictures, would also release Camp Nowhere, which, don't let that poster fool you, this isn't exactly the Animal House for tweaks. Although, it does get pretty risque for a PG movie at points. It's a film where a group of kids looking to get out of the summer camp programs that their square parents have foisted upon them devise a plan to create their own, with the help of a disgruntled ex-drama teacher played by Christopher Lloyd. If this sounds oddly similar to the 2006 Justin Long comedy Accepted, then believe me, I, nor you, am the first person to make that comparison. One of the movie's overarching themes is that of breaking social norms and going outside the box that society has placed you in, as this commune of losers, weirdos, and outsiders learns to live and respect each other in this almost anti-authoritarian paradise they have set up for themselves, while trying to get the authorities off their trail. They get pretty close to blowing each other to pieces, though, because guess what? No adult supervision, actually, objectively, not a great idea.
We watched Star Trek 4. Everybody seen that?
Is that the one where he fights the big Russian guy?
Arnold, that's Rocky 4.
Mud, played by Jonathan Jackson, learns to speak up for himself and decides he still wants to be a geeky kid. Mud is in the same ballpark as other protagonists like Henry from Rookie of the Year or Preston from Blake Check, in that he's a social outcast underachiever who manages to become appreciated by everybody by the end. He and Christopher Lloyd's Dennis have a classic make-believe father-surrogate relationship that maybe sorta goes somewhere. Your mileage may vary. Melody K's Gabby aspires to stop eating junk food. Of course, in classic Hollywood terms, she's not even that particularly chubby. Andrew Keegan's Zach wants to be less of a jerk and questions if he should skip school or not as he strikes up a relationship with Trish. See, he's an actual bully character with some agency. What has the 90s not wrought? And Martinette Patterson's Trish tries to stop being so aloof. Truthfully though, Camp Nowhere is sitcom material stretched out for 90 minutes. Jonathan Prince's direction is static. The script by Andrew Kurtzman and Elliot Wald, both veterans of Second City, who wrote for Saturday Night Live, and whose credits include films like See No Evil, Hear No Evil, and Down Periscope, features gags that often feel pedestrian and predictable.
The doctor says it's a bronchial virus.
Hey look, it's Herbie. I guess he had to take what he could after the television show got canceled. Stanley Sizzle's cinematography is fine, if a bit ordinary, and as nice as those themes are that I highlighted earlier, they are not sufficiently executed enough for me to consider them satisfactory. If not for the scuzzier implied material, this wouldn't have seemed out of place on Nickelodeon circa 1994. The real reason to see this movie today is for its cameo-filled supporting cast, which includes not one, but two Star Trek actors as the parents, Jonathan Frakes, along with his wife Janine Francis, and Kate Mulgrew, years before she played Janeway, Peter Scolari, Wendy Macuna, Emmett Walsh, Burgess Meredith, and F. Thomas Wilson, Biff of Back to the Future fame. But it's Christopher Lloyd as Dennis Van Welker, a burnt-out, hippy-dippy Winston Churchill fan who steals the show. Dennis is sort of like Reverend Jim from Taxi, if Reverend Jim was a disgraced former drama arts teacher who had more than a few run-ins with the law. This movie is one of the closest things that Lloyd has to a genuine star vehicle, and boy, does he seem to be chomping at the bit as he goes through one cringe comedy moment after another.
You know, back in the 60s when we said we wanted to change society, maybe we should have been more specific.
The part not only requires Lloyd to do all his twitchy vocal mannerisms and hand gestures, but also to perform charades, play with stick figures, and put on lots and lots of get-ups. There's enough dress-up here, it'd make Dana Carvey and the Master of Disguise feel like an insignificant piece of furniture in comparison. Lloyd's get-ups include the usual 90s cultural references, Richard Simmons, Steve Wozniak. Hey, that's two Disney-related movies I've talked about from 1994 with people taking on false identities that relate to Apple. That's weird. And wait, is that supposed to be Saddam Hussein? I mean, maybe it's just a random military getup, but let's just say some things don't age so gracefully. Lloyd's expertise comes in handy in the Home Alone style climax, where the kids have to put on the greatest show ever as they try to fool their parents into thinking that they're actually 4 different summer camps. Lloyd serves as the Robin Williams and Mrs. Doubtfire in this situation as he goes from part to part and area to area. It would have gone on perfectly, except this whole facade needs to be exposed, so Thomas F. Wilson's Lieutenant Elliot Hendricks and Emmett Walsh's T.R. Polk show up to spoil the party. Dennis decides to go full Jim Jones and pretends to be an indoctrinator, considering that 2 of the actors in this film, Andrew Keegan and Allison Mack, were involved in cults, and Dennis himself gives off unintentional creeper hanging out with kid vibes. This is not great in a modern context. Camp Nowhere's a great wish fulfillment movie. It's just not a great movie. Whatever. A year later, Disney released Heavyweights, which is a great summer vacation film that, problematic weight issues aside, perfectly captures the season, and is overall just more successful at Camp Nowhere when it comes to being a comedy. On to the next. Not all the movies released from this decade, though, made with kids in mind, were exactly grounded in their approach. In fact, some of them could be downright magical. Take Michael Gottlieb's 1995 A Kid in King Arthur's Court, a movie where Thomas C. Nichols, Rookie of the Year, still at it as a baseball player, stars as Calvin Fuller, who finds himself transported back in time by magical MacGuffin man Merlin and asked to use his roller skates and his CD player to restore peace and prosperity to the Middle Ages while winning the heart of a fair maiden. Or at least that's what the logline and a couple of reviews might tell you. In actuality, this particular culture clash, boy out of his time element, feels almost superfluous and more a byproduct of needing jokes to keep the kids happy and what is otherwise the most paint by the numbers, fish out of water, earnest hero's journey you could possibly imagine. Watch as the majestic Camelot gets turned into the equivalent of a great looking theater show production with its cast of primarily UK actors and American expats, including most notably a young Kate Winslet and Daniel Craig. It reads as one of those cheapo, money laundering European productions that just happened to find its way to theaters. It's as if Kids Bop directed a sequel to John Borman's Excalibur, crossed with elements from Army of Darkness and Robin Hood Prince of Thieves, one in which the Knights of the Round Table don't exist, and Merlin is supposedly dead. Or it could just be that Arthur's memory is failing him. This version of King Arthur is an out-of-shape, tired old ruler who has lost touch with his people, which the movie goes out of its way to beat you over the head with senselessly. He's played by an astonishingly committed Josh Ackland. In fact, it's bizarre how he speaks in Shakespearean, old-style English, and nobody else does it quite as internally consistent as him.
By Merlin's prophecies, dost thou come at me in my sleep?
I fart in your general direction. Your mother was a hamster, and your father smelt of elderberries.
Arthur and Calvin team up when his daughter, Princess Katie, is kidnapped by the impossibly evil Lord Belasco, an advisor of Arthur, played by Art Malik. Malik was also the same actor who played the villain in True Lies, leading to some really awkwardly inserted bits of what I think the movie perceives to be buddy duo comedy, as Calvin reportedly teaches the king to be a better ruler, and Arthur returns the favor by making Calvin into a more competent warrior. What gets me here the most is that for a movie that is clearly angling for a postmodern, family-friendly, revisionist take on the Middle Ages, Kate Winslet revealing herself to be a Black Knight is startlingly similar to Pixar's Brave, is how much it still has time to crawl back to the damsel in distress formula. This is particularly egregious when the princess in question is evidently shown to be more than a capable fighter on her own. I guess they call them tried and true tropes for a reason. I haven't seen the work of Mark Twain eviscerated this much in a Disney context since Unidentified Flying Oddball, aka A Spaceman in King Arthur's Court, with Dennis Dugan, which, in a weird twist of casting fate, coincidentally also features Ron Moody as Merlin. Oh my, how far does the Connecticut Yankee Disney-released rabbit hole even go? Oh, come on, Disney. It was cute at first, but now it's just kind of become a cliche. And as if that wasn't enough of a tail-spinning, head-inducing ordeal, A Kid in King Arthur's Court got a direct-to-video sequel, A Kid in Aladdin's Palace, or A Kid in Aladdin's Court. I don't know. I guess copyright lawyers were feasting that day. And with a title like Aladdin's Palace, you know this movie is going to be very forward-thinking.
Alibaba and the Four Thieves.
If A Kid in King Arthur's Court was a sober businessman's idea of a good children's movie, then A Kid in Aladdin's Palace is what happens when you give the car keys to your drunken uncle and ask him to write a normal screenplay. Producer Robert L. Levy, who co-wrote A Kid in King Arthur's Court, steps behind the camera this time, and his modus operandi seems to have been to up the kid culture clash antics by a measurable 100 tons. Gone are even the slightest bits of attempts at historical, kid-friendly fantasy. In their place are more cartoonish antics that break the physics of reality, unflattering stereotypes, fart jokes, and lots of wonderful straight-to-video mid-90s CGI. It makes a kid in King Arthur's court look like Pasolini's Arabian Nights in its artfulness in comparison. This lava was so much better done in Disney's Aladdin 5 years earlier, while this monstrosity of pre-rendered PS1 graphics just looks like they took a vague drawing of a Middle Eastern palace, plastered it on a green screen, and called it a day. For a straight-to-video movie in 1997, the effects here are just exquisite. Obscure oddities like a kid in Aladdin's palace are part of the reason why I committed to this project in the first place. And as somebody who remembers not only watching this movie, but preferring it over a kid in King Arthur's court as a kid, because it didn't commit the cardinal sin of being unforgivably boring, I was not disappointed. Coincidentally, in 1997, the same year they showered us with the greatest film ever, A Kid in Aladdin's Lamp, Trimark would also release Manny Coto's Star Kid, an E.T. wannabe masquerading as a comic book adventure in which an eco-suit that has more than a passing resemblance to 1950s sci-fi movie robots from a world inhabited by aliens straight out of Star Wars or The Last Starfighter lands on Earth and is found by a 12-year-old loser boy named Spencer Griffith, played by Joseph Manzella, Tim of Jurassic Park fame. Though the robot also kind of looks like an overgrown baby, this movie's budget is pretty evidently skimpy. I describe the Star Kid and Star Kid as a bizarre mishmash of an inexperienced, less approachable looking, screwy Superman crossed with a mech warrior and featuring a very 80s-90s overcoming your fear protagonist piloting its center. Spencer is initially horrified by the vessel, but soon learns he can use the suit to his advantage. Points for accuracy, getting back at the bully at school, and most concerningly, peeping on the girl that he has a crush on. Family-friendly salaciousness, yay. Don't worry though, unlike some 90s kids movies, this is more mild and youthful. The humor here is about as low common denominator as it gets, most of it based around the alien machines, misunderstandings of Earth's customs, leading to a number of scenes in which it causes a concerning amount of mayhem and destruction. If this were a traditional big-budgeted superhero movie, we might be arguing over the number of civilian casualties. Considering that this family is evidently middle class, I question, how are they even gonna pay back for that fridge? In rubes. Although, much to my surprise, the film did manage to get a few chuckles out of me.
I'm eating a cyber suit turd.
Extra credit, too, for having a bully character who actually plays an integral part in the plot. You guys are probably expecting me to have my pitchforks ready for this one, and while I wouldn't argue that Star Kid is a particularly well-made film, it devolves into a jumbled mess of a robot versus alien movie that is marred by, to put it kindly, some real late 90s CGI and unknowingly forced dramatic stakes. But if I'm being truthful with myself, I thought it was okay. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed this video. This project took longer than I was expecting, so this is going to have a follow-up in the future. Until then, remember to subscribe, share, and hit that like button. Also, check out my website at dansden.net. Anyway, see you next time, guys.